Okay, Dale, take it away for phase 2.
All right, we've covered scanning black and white negatives. I want to spend just a little bit of time scanning black and white prints, and then we'll move on and do a color slide. So I've got a print in the scanner here. Go ahead and close this out, close that out. So the thing we're going to change here is this. I'm going to change this to reflective. Yes, I know it's going to change. That's why I selected it. And we'll set our resolution at 600 because this is an 8x10 print I'm going to scan. And that's really all you have to change to do a preview. So now we hit the preview. Doing the black and white prints is fairly straightforward. We don't have to worry about Newton rings. They don't show up when you're scanning prints because you're not dealing with a transparent medium that catches those light rays as they bounce back and forth. Now you can rotate this around using these little buttons here. I usually don't bother. Again, I've been doing it long enough that I don't need to worry about that. So again, we're going to use our marquee to kind of zoom in on the image itself.
I got a question.
Yes.
So when you set the marquee here, you apparently purposely went a little outside of the image.
On the prints, yeah, the negatives you want to get right up to it.
Inside, because one thing I'll find is that on the print or the image, the extreme borders can be quite light or quite dark.
Yes.
And it will affect the overall tonal balance of the true image that I'm. So my tendency is to always put the marquee inside, so that those extremes on the edges don't affect my tonal balance.
Right, and that is key with a negative. With a print, it's a little bit different. Because what this does now, this is a white border around the outside. That's 0. So
Okay.
I want to scan that. That gives me a reference point. That's the whitest part of that image I'm ever going to see.
Right.
So I can put my cursor on that whitest point and now set that. So
Use that as a
I get
reference.
point.
Okay.
With a negative, you can't really do that, and you want to get rid of all that stuff because that will affect your histogram.
So negatives, anything non-reflective, anything
Correct.
transparent, marquee inside the,
Or right up, either
just
right up to
right
it.
up to it, or
Yeah.
right just barely inside.
Right. You want to eliminate as much extraneous stuff as possible.
The noise of the outside of the.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right. But with a print, as I said, this gives me a quick reference. I can go right to that border and say, okay, here's my white, where's my dot?
Okay.
So now we go to the histogram again. And with a print, it's a little bit different than a negative. A print, you want to make sure that the shadow, again, is right where the mountain meets the ocean. And your highlight, same thing. You want to make sure it is right there. With a negative, you're going to be, like Kent said, kind of left of that big peak. But with a print, you want to be right at the edge. And sometimes you might even have to go beyond. Most of the time, right up to the edge will work just fine. And then again, you grab your mid-tone, you kind of play with it, move it back and forth until you get something that looks reasonably good. Play around with it. Nothing's going to happen if you bend this all one way or the other. It shows you what these things do, and you can always go back and change it again. Same thing with your shadow. You can see how black that black gets. What you're doing is you're clipping the information. Anything to the left of that triangle is going to be black. It's going to be 100% black. And the same with the white triangle. Anything to the right of that, or to the left of it rather, you can see how your highlights go away because you're clipping that information. So with a print, you want to make sure that your highlight is right at where the mountain meets the ocean. That's kind of my terminology for this. I'm sure there's a technical name for it, but I don't understand it.
Mountain ocean.
Mountain ocean. Yep. That's it. So we hit scan.
I have a question here.
Yes.
The type of black and white film that is used to make the image can kind of do strange things with color. And sometimes things that you see in the real world that seem like a fairly bright color turn out really dark in black and white, and vice
Correct.
versa.
Red in particular.
Yeah, is this a very effective way of kind of compensating for that?
No,
Or would you
because
wanna do
it's in
that?
the original image, you can't do anything to alter that. Back in the day, a lot of California photographers used to shoot with a yellow filter on the front of their cameras when they're shooting SP, because it lightened up the red. If you didn't do that, the red nose blended in with the gray body because they're basically essentially the same tone. So they shot with a yellow filter, and if you really wanted to exaggerate it, you shot with a red filter, and then the red nose turned white because it absorbed all the red light.
I
But-
noticed that phenomenon when going through pictures of old Seattle streetcars in black and white, and they seemed kind of dark. And we have a color movie that was made in 1940 that shows them in orange, and it's actually a pretty bright color.
Mm-hmm.
I was just always kind of curious what happened there.
It's the way black and white film sees tonal range.
Why is there no keyboard shortcut for those? It drives me flipping insane.
I don't know. I don't use keyboard shortcuts. I try to remember them, but my brain doesn't work that way. So, remember, I'm the guy who still uses a compass in a GPS world. So now we can put our cursor on the darkest part. Go to the info box, check the percentages. We're a little flat, so we can probably do a little bit better in the scan to get that closer to 95.
Oh, you want it 95?
Yeah, generally you want to, you don't want to go above 95. This I can work with, even if it's in the mid 80s.
88.
I can work with that. What I can't work with is 100. So 95 or below, as long as you're kind of in the ballpark. Again, we're not trying to do a professional image at this point. We're just trying to capture as much information as that piece of film or print has to offer. So we go over to the highlights. We're 8% in the sky. Now I can put this right over here. And we're at 6 in the white.
So that's good.
That's good. We're good on the highlights. That's as much highlight as you're ever going to get out of an image. Shadow, yeah, we can probably do a little bit better. But if you go into Photoshop in curves, we can fix just about anything. You know, we can put more black in. We can adjust here. This gives us our contrast curve, playing with either one of these. So we can get to the point where that is. So now we're at 90 already, and I haven't even begun to play with that. So if I'm going for print,
Oh, and it puts a slash in, so this under K.
shows you where it started
It started and now.
and what your adjustment has
what
been
it's
made
saying that
to
you
it.
haven't yet committed to.
Exactly, exactly. You can also do the same thing in levels to a point. You can adjust. Here's our histogram again. We can drag this over, and that again darkens this back up.
Why is that histogram different than the one we saw before?
That's a good question. Only thing I can say is this is Photoshop, and the other one was Epson Scan. This is dealing with the scan that was captured versus the original print, which the Epson has seen.
That's the main difference. The histogram that was shown to you in Epson represents what it saw of the picture. This is Photoshop saying, here's the histogram of the image
Of the-
data now in
As it exists
Photoshop.
as a scan.
As Epson processes the image based on his settings, the histogram is going to land different once it gets in Photoshop.
Right.
Look at that, you got right up to 95 there.
Right, and all I did was move this shadow area over
Right,
here
yeah.
to the mountain meets the ocean. So,
I find this easier to deal with than the curves. The curves,
I use them
Are
both.
helpful when something's really kind of out
Yeah.
of whack.
I use a lot of the functions in Photoshop. These are kind of my go-to ones, the levels and the curves. The other one I use a lot is shadow highlight, but you don't want to get too carried away with that. This right here, where you can adjust the shadows independently of the highlights and vice versa. You can use the highlights to darken without affecting the shadows. But if you get too carried away with this, it starts looking real wonky. So, baby steps in this. You just want to do a little bit here and there.
But that might not be any of the people in this room doing that work because
Exactly.
this is post-processing.
That's the
This-
point I was making to Dean, and the point of this whole demonstration is to show you guys how to get a scan. Because you're not gonna be doing a whole lot of post. And if you do post, that's not something you're going to send out to somebody who's requesting an image. When somebody requests an image, you wanna send them a raw scan. It's then their responsibility to handle any post-processing. Because as soon as you do post, now you've altered your raw scan and you've defeated the whole purpose of getting all the information you want. As long as people who are requesting the image understand that they are getting a raw scan and it's going to look flat to them because you're capturing all the information in the negative, you're not making it look pretty. As soon as you start making it look pretty, you're going to start discarding information depending on where the image is displayed, because it's going to look different on a screen than it's going to look on a printed page or in a dot printed print out of a printer. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time doing any of this post stuff. I mean, if people have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer, but our goal here today is to get a good scan to begin with.
How, just for reference, is there an average amount of time you spend on an image when you're going to use it in a book,
In post,
in post?
it can go anywhere from 15 minutes to my record so far is 40 hours.
Holy Moses. Was that thing just destroyed? that
It
image?
was a scan that was done by an outside vendor that I had no control over. It was a 4x5 transparency, and they scanned it without cleaning it. So the scan looked like somebody had spilled pepper all over it.
Oh my.
So I had to go and clone out about 10,000 little black specks throughout the whole image. It's tedious, it's time consuming, but it was a rare image. Had to have it, got to spend the time. If I've got two images that are identical, one's dirty, one's clean, I'm going for the clean one.
Yeah, right.
But again, it kind of stresses the point, we want to make sure that the stuff is cleaned here before it is scanned. You can't get it 100%, there's no way to do that, because of the age of the material that we're dealing with. In slides, the more time a slide has spent in the projector, the more gunk it's going to have, and the more gunk it's going to have embedded in the emulsion that you can't get out. Because when it's in a projector, it heats up, the emulsion expands, the dust sticks, when it cools off, the emulsion grips onto that dirt and doesn't let it go. So we want to have virgin slides if possible, rather than some slide that somebody's gone around to show, 100 different organizations with the same original. But anyway, I digress. Cleaning is pretty important because that reduces the time somebody has to spend in post cleaning it up. And because we're not using digital ice to take care of any of that stuff, it becomes more tedious. I am still not convinced that this technology knows the difference between a bolt head and a piece of dust on the negative. And I don't want the scanner or Photoshop taking out what might be a critical rivet. Somebody's counting rivets and they go, hey, there used to be 100 here, now there's only 99. Believe me, there are people, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with them, that will notice all of those rivets.
Yes.
So I don't use any of the digital stuff to take care of any of that dirt or anything. I'll deal with it in post. As a historical organization, you want to be as accurate and as lifelike as possible, and using any of these post techniques are just not advisable. The computer is a double-edged sword. It allows people with no computer access to be able to do stuff, but it also allows people with no computer access to do stuff, because they do stuff they shouldn't be doing. All right, I'm just going to pop a slide down here on Platen, and we'll do a quick look. Anybody have any questions about scanning black and white prints? Okay, so we're going to do a slide. So we're going to go back up here, and because I don't have a 35 holder for this, I'm going to go to the film area guide rather than the film holder. And I'm going to change this to positive and change our bit depth to 24-bit color. And I'm not going to scan at the 4800 because it just takes too long for this demonstration. So we'll do 1200, hit preview.
Some slide software, I don't know if Epson does this, does something that I don't find particularly helpful. I've been able to fix it, but it'll start talking to you about the physical size of the resulting image,
Right,
and then it decides what the DPI is by doing the math of it knows how big the original is and how
yeah,
big you say
again, you don't want the machine making decisions for
Right,
you.
right. You can sometimes fix it,
Yeah,
but sometimes people think, well, I want to make it a 5x7 because it'll be a better size on the screen when I first open it.
right,
But then it drops the DPI
right,
to achieve that.
right.
So one of the things I do when you get Photoshop back open, I'm sure you've done this a million times, but it took me a while to discover this. I can show you what I do to fix that problem. Because I sometimes get images in a bit. It's slides in particular that this happens to.
I'm gonna go ahead and zoom on this one because it's slow. Well, see, I don't scan 35 millimeter on the Epson. I use the Nikon film scanner for doing that. So.
And its UI is different, I assume. The interface, the software looks
Yes,
fairly.
it's using the Nikon scan software instead of the. Now here, we want to make sure we get rid of as much of this black outline as possible. So we're going to move this marquee in to make sure we crop that out, because that will definitely affect your histogram.
So, so on slides, marquee needs to be inside.
Yes,
Okay.
no,
A
I'll
little
leave
black in the corners is okay.
a little bit of black in the corner is not going to be that problematic. So you just want to kind of get it close. Now, when you're using the film holder, it's going to hold that slide more squarely.
Right.
Like here, I've got a little bit of, it's tilted a little bit, it's
Yeah.
turned, because I just dropped it on the plot.
Right.
When you post-process, do you often have to adjust for a photographer holding the camera slightly
All
sideways?
the time. I mean, all the time. Yeah.
So you will try and figure out what earth level is and apply it to the image.
Locomotives are great for that, because you've got this vertical line right here at the back of the cab, on diesels anyway. So I kind of pick a good strong vertical line in the middle of the image somewhere,
And then use
and
the
then I
ruler.
draw a guide over to it
Yeah.
and place it on there, and I can see, okay, it's off about a half a degree, and rotate it until I get it right on the middle.
Oh, you don't use the ruler tool?
You can use the ruler tool.
Okay.
You can, yeah. Yes, sir.
So why did you use the film area guide as opposed to slide holder on this?
Because I didn't bring that one with me, and I didn't feel like digging one out of the drawer over here.
Okay, which is preferable?
Well, the film area, or the film holder is preferable when you're doing this kind of stuff.
It just makes the scanner do less work because it only scans a channel, because it knows where the image is supposed to be.
Exactly. It keys in on these slots on the back of each one of these holders. If you look at the slot from one holder to the next, they're not the same. So the scanner reads this distance, and it tells the scanner which holder is using. And then it can zero in using XY coordinates on where the film should be in relation to this holder.
Right.
So in your cardboard mock-ups, then you kind of use that as a guide?
Well, no,
Yeah, but
I put this same notch in here because the scanner won't scan without it. But it doesn't tell the scanner what film holder it is because this film holder doesn't exist in the scanner's brain. You still have to have the slot there, but.
So it's important to put that in there.
So, we've got our preview. We're gonna hit the histogram. Now this, with color, you can kind of play with a little bit. There are no hard and fast rules. You can see the shadow when I move that to the left, it kind of brightens things up. But you don't want to go too far because then you're going to end up with too light of a black. So a lot of this is trial and error. You're going to grab the highlight and you can see how much that brightens things up. But again, you don't want to go all the way here. That might be a little bit too light. So I'd probably park it somewhere in here, somewhere that looks about right. And then you can use your midtones again to kind of adjust exposure-wise. And after
Seems
you
like the
have that-
sky is a key element
Sky's
there.
a pretty key element, and then I look at the shadows too, to make sure it's
Yeah,
not gone
under
too
the
black.
trucks and stuff like that.
Exactly, exactly. The color balance, you have these options here that you can adjust the histogram for each one of the colors. There's your red, there's your green, there's your blue. If you've got an image that has gone a little bit yellow, you can kind of dial some of that back out. If you've got one that's red, you can go into the green channel and dial some of that out. Now, when I'm scanning a shifted image like an Ektachrome or an Agfachrome that's gone red, this color restoration button actually works fairly well with it.
I've seen that for stuff I've done.
Yeah, it will correct probably 90% of the issues of something that's faded one color or another. So when you're dealing with color, you have my blessing. You may use this color restoration
This
button.
checkbox and only this checkbox.
Exactly. All the rest of them, you'll get a ruler across the knuckles. But this one here, it sometimes works okay, but if the slide's normal, you don't need it. You
But
don't
look at that, there's more red in there than we realized.
exactly.
It
Look at
cleaned
the
up
red
ground
that it takes
substantially.
out of there. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
How all the red just disappeared there on
Right.
the ground?
Does that apply mostly to Kodak film, did I hear you say?
It applies to any color film. The E6 process films like Ektachrome, Agfachrome
Fujichrome.
tend to fade more as they age and the more time they spend in the projector. So this can be really useful there. Kodachromes are fairly stable. They don't usually change much over time. So it's not as necessary to use it. But when you're scanning a color image, go ahead and click this thing on. Click it back and forth. Take a look at it. You go, oh, gee, it looks pretty good that way.
So I hear Ken's comment on the dirt, the ground looks better with it checked. But to me, the sky has now gone almost all white. I got no blue.
It does take some of the blue out.
So
It does.
I'm just wondering if in this case, if I would just default, let's not change anything here, get the data into
Yes.
Photoshop,
Yes.
then I can go.
Then you can fix all these individual colors in Photoshop where you have more control over
Then
it.
I could magic wand the sky,
Yes.
adjust it,
Exactly. Exactly.
magic wand the lower part adjusted.
Right. Right. So once you've adjusted the histogram, we've got a pretty decent slide. I'm not going to do color restoration here. It's time to scan it. And again, you want to get close. You're not going to get 100% at the scanner. You just want to get 90% at the scanner. That last 10% you fix in Photoshop.
And again, it might not be anybody in this room doing that work. That's in some
Exactly.
ways a different skill set, I think.
It is a different skill set. It's a very steep learning curve. We could
So-
spend probably a week here just talking about Photoshop and restoring images.
Right.
I hear you there, but the flip side of that is, for instance, the modeling committee. A lot of these images are critical to the modeling committee because we're either sharing them with vendors to say, this is what the thing needs to look like,
Right,
or we're doing presentations at conventions saying,
Right.
here's a bunch of slides. They'll never get to it, those slides may never get to a Dale Saunders.
right.
So, someday I would love to learn some of those Photoshop tips and tricks for the images that may never, might not be targeted towards print, but still have a lot of value.
Yeah, right. Or maybe I should just say it's a different role. It could be the same person, because the modeling committee doesn't have a lot of people on it. But there's Dean getting original images from the scanner,
That's right.
and then there's Dean cleaning up a photo to send to a vendor.
Yeah.
Well, and
And you don't do much cleanup, or you don't do any post work when you're scanning a large batch, right? You're just
no, I
you're
do
doing
raw
all the raw
scans,
scans first.
put an R behind it in the file name, and I move on.
Right.
So I think the key thing for Gary, and one of the reasons why we need an archive committee for the NPRHA, is to establish that when we scan stuff here at the archives, we establish an original scan, and that is never touched, and it's essentially treated as a piece of archive material.
Exactly.
And then there can be derivatives, a derivative vector, if you will, for the modeling committee, and a different vector for the calendar, where the image might be used in the calendar or in a Saunders
And there's a
book
lot of
or
postal
whatever.
vectors on those
There's
photos.
potential vectors in all those things, but we need to have a policy so that there's an original that is untouched, so we don't have to rescan, and then can be derivatives from that for various purposes.
Right, because you can take that raw scan and you can go these different vectors. If you're
Yeah.
doing for a presentation, you're going to be in RGB color. You're going to make sure you're in the same color space as the projector
Right.
so that it looks right on the screen. But that's not going to work for doing print
A
production.
CMYK print.
That's- Exactly.
That's right.
And that brings up the whole manipulation thing. Do I manipulate in CMYK? Do I manipulate in RGB?
Right.
Personal preference, different highway. I think CMYK, because I've been doing it for so long.
Because you're a book guy.
It's, well, and it's additive color.
Ah,
RGB is subtractive color.
I see.
You have to think in reverse when you're dealing RGB. If I want the sky to be more blue in CMYK, I add blue. If I want it to be more blue in RGB, I take away yellow. Well, what?
Yeah, that's hard.
So unless your brain is wired backwards than mine, I do all my manipulation in CMYK because that's where 99.9% of my production goes, is into CMYK.
Sure.
I do presentations for like Winter Rail or historical associations when I'm doing a program on a particular subject. Everything has to be in RGB because then you're dealing with a projector.
Right.
And again, you make sure that your resolutions are common throughout the whole presentation. You make sure that your color spaces are all common,
Right.
tied to the projector,
Right.
so that it looks good on the screen.
Right.
But getting back to your point, Dean, you want to have an original raw scan with as much information as possible and archive that raw scan as untouchable.
Right.
You can copy it, duplicate it, do whatever you want to do, but you always have that raw scan to go back to.
Right.
Dale, could you go to the image and resize, the resize dialog? I'll just tell everybody what I learned. So, right now, this is you see the document size? It says it's 1.345 inches wide and 0.897 tall. That's actually correct for a
That's the
slide.
physical
That's the
dimension
physical
of the
dimension.
slide.
But I often get images that somebody else has scanned of a slide, and it'll say like 5 by 7.
Exactly.
And it'll be a much lower DP. I remember for slides, we want about 4,800.
Yes.
So you can fix that here.
Right.
But
Well,
the
two-
main thing is you want to uncheck resample. Because
Yeah.
you can rescale it
Right.
without resampling it.
Right.
That's the key thing.
But you can only do that to a point. If they don't have enough pixels in
That's right,
there,
that's right.
you can't go up.
No. But
You
if
can
the
only go
information's
down.
all there, and
Right.
they've used, because some of these scanning softwares, again, think in terms of what do you want the destination size to be physically, which is a weird way, but some of
Right.
these scanning softwares do that.
Right.
And so it'll be like 5x7 at 1200 DPI or whatever, and you can, if you check off resample, you can go back to 4800 DPI and suddenly the physical dimensions will go down to something like this, which
Right.
is where it used to be.
Right.
I just find that more useful to do.
Remember at the
Slides.
very beginning, I was talking about resolution versus image size.
Yep,
You can change the resolution size depending on the size of the original.
right.
It's that sliding scale that doesn't change. The numbers change, physical size versus resolution size, but the number of pixels per inch
Inch, that's what.
doesn't really change.
Yeah. Okay.
Make sense?
Yep. So when you, without dragging anybody through the mud,
Mm-hmm.
when you think about books you've seen in the last 5 years that had less than stellar image quality, what do you think they did wrong?
Some books I've seen, they've done everything wrong.
All the things?
All the things wrong. Yeah. Remember my double-edged sword analogy,
Right,
where it allows the common man access to all this stuff,
right,
and it allows the common man all access to this stuff?
yeah.
If they don't have the photographic knowledge or the knowledge of how the software works, they do stuff wrong because they don't know any better. It's not that they're intentionally doing it wrong,
Right.
they just don't understand what they need to do to get to where they're going. It would be easy to count on one hand the number of books that I've seen in the past 10 years that were done correctly.
Wow.
It's kind of sad, really, when you look at some of the. But see, I'm picking up stuff with my eye that most people will never see,
Sure.
because I'm hypercritical about this stuff, and the average person thinks, "Oh, wow, that's a great shot." One other point that I want to bring up, and Dean kind of brought it to mind. You said you were providing images to vendors for building models, and that is color.
Sure.
What color is NP green? It's whatever color you want it to be.
Yeah.
Because even if you have a paint chip,
Which we do now. We have
that color has
reference.
changed from the time that paint chip was created until now. Plus, what light source are you looking at this paint chip under? Is it fluorescent? Is it incandescent? Is it sunlight? Is it LED? All of these different light sources cast a tone into things.
Right.
The same thing happens when you're dealing with color images on the screen. The film, when this photo was taken, rendered those colors the best that that film could do. That doesn't mean it's accurate. And now we've scanned it and we're going to go into post and change stuff around to make the photo look pretty. Now, does that have any resemblance to what that original scene looked like when the photo was taken? Probably not.
Right.
So when you're using any kind of a printed image or even a film image to judge color by, it's a pointless exercise. You know, a lot of the modelers get real tied up in what color is this and what color was that. I've got a great photo of a train I shot on the Western Pacific, had 4 Burlington Northern GP35s on it. It's a down-on view, got all 4 units, and every single one of them is a different shade of green. What color is BN green? It's whatever color they had in the paint shop that day and how much it's weathered, yada, yada, yada. Well, if you're trying to use this as a color example, forget it.
Well, I mean, something like the BN or the BNSF also, they're all over North America, and so the color of light actually changes.
Yeah,
Whether you're in Vancouver
absolutely.
or Pomona.
Right.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not sending color photos to vendors to expect them to match the paint.
No.
We have color cards for that.
We have
Right.
My Uber point was, other than print, we have several reasons for the photographs to be post-processed so that they look good.
Right.
And so I totally understand that we could spend a week on Photoshop, but that it's also desirable to, you know, to have some of those low-hanging fruit enhancements we can do to the photos.
Sure.
And
I
I've
can-
learned quite a bit just even here with the scanning on some of that.
I can go ahead and run through real quickly what I do. Would that?
That'd be awesome.
That would be helpful?
Yeah.
So I've got a raw color scan here. Again, I manipulate in CMYK because that's the way my brain works. So before I do anything, I change the mode. But there's an inner step here. Before I go from RGB to CMYK, I go down to lab color and I go over to channels, and in the lightness channel, this is where I do the unsharp mask. If you do unsharp mask in either RGB or CMYK, you can start to create halos around things if you sharpen too much. In the lightness channel, you don't get that, at least not as much. So on your filter, you're going to go down to sharpen, unsharp mask. And this is where you can set your amount, your radius, and your threshold. The amount is how much sharpening you want to apply. And I'll just go to my go-to starting point, which is 200, a radius of 2, and a threshold of 2, plus or minus a few tenths. That's kind of my go-to. Now, if you click on and off, you can see the sharpening effect that this
It's pretty
does.
dramatic, isn't it?
It can be. And you have to be careful because you don't want to get too carried away with this. What the threshold does is in these kind of medium areas, it will start to accentuate the film grain. And
Right.
if that starts to happen, you can take this threshold up, and that will kind of reduce the sharpening from one film grain to the next. It still sharpens when you have a hard edge like this black versus a medium versus a highlight. But you can already start to see on either side of this highlight, you're starting to see a little like a darker band on either side of it. That's the sharpening effect. So sometimes you might have to reduce the radius and increase the amount. That gets rid of that band a little bit. So you kind of play with these depending on the image. And every image is different, so I just can't say set it here and move on,
Sure.
because every one is different. I usually start, like I said, at 200, 2, and 2, because it's easy to remember. So now the image is fairly sharp. I have not changed the resolution. I'm still, in my world, still 4000 DPI. That's not what this is, but I didn't scan it. But anyway, I scan at full resolution. I manipulate at full resolution. When it comes time to going into print production, then I reduce the size, the physical size of the photo, and change the resolution. So after I've done the sharpening in the lightness channel, then I'll go to CMYK. So it looks pretty much like it did before, except now it's a little sharper. Okay, now we get into the color end of things. You got tons of things that you can adjust. I usually just kind of go down the line. I start with levels. I see where the shadow is. If I don't like it, I'll move it over a little bit to try to get all the information I can. Now with black and white, remember you got 0 and 100 are your outer limits. With color, in RGB or CMYK, it's 0 and 255. So 255 is absolute white, 0 is absolute black. So I'm going to move this over to there, and then I'm going to lighten it up a little bit by going to shadow highlight. I don't want to lighten it that much. That's way too much. So I'm kind of looking at the darker areas of the image, and the highlights I'm not going to do anything with here. Again, each one of these things is kind of baby steps. You're taking baby steps toward your ultimate goal. You don't want to do big swings at it to get there with one tool. So I've done the levels, I've done shadow highlight, Now I'll go to curves. The curves allow me to change each individual channel. Like if it's too blue or not enough blue, I can change that. I can change the contrast in each level by just putting in an S-curve. The S-curve gives you the contrast, or the S-curve going the other direction flattens things out. So the curves I use quite a bit when I'm trying to correct the color because it gives me more latitude.
So not features like saturation.
I use saturation sometimes, but usually in the reverse. I'll get to that here in a second.
Okay.
So the other thing that I use a lot is selective color, because I can go in here and change, like this orange. Your contaminating color in red is cyan, and by contaminating it means it makes it look less bright. So I can go in and either take out or add cyan. How come it's not? I should be getting a change there. That's interesting.
Do you have a selection?
No. Let's see. There we go. Okay, yeah, it is. All right, so I can go into each individual color and take out the contaminating color. Like in the blue sky, you don't want to have any yellow up in that blue sky because that makes it look less appealing. So again, we go back to our info box here, and you can see under yellow, there's 1% yellow there, right where the cursor is. I don't want any yellow up there. I'll go in and use the magic wand, select the sky, get the yellow out of there completely. I'll take out the black, so the only thing left in the blue sky is cyan and magenta. Typical blue sky is going to be 2 parts cyan to 1 part magenta. No yellow, no black. These reds, now here there's no cyan in there at all, and you can tell that by looking right here. It says 0. That's why when I adjusted that, nothing happened, because there's nothing there to adjust. Your blacks, you want to put the cursor on the darkest black you can find. And these numbers here, when you're dealing in print production, the sum total of all 4 of those numbers added up together can't be more than 300%.
For black.
For black. That's the blackest, the darkest part in the whole image. If you get above 300%, the pressman will be screaming at you
Right.
because it'll start to block up.
He's laying down too much
He's
ink.
laying down too much ink. So you want to make sure that these percentages, when added all up, are no more than 300. Now I've got kind of a formula I use for black. It's usually mid-70s on the cyan, mid-60s on the magenta, mid-70s on the yellow, mid-70s on the black. That gives me a good black on the printed page. Gives me a terrible black on a computer monitor, but it gives me a great black on the printed page. That's why you have to be able to denote what direction these scans are going towards, because we've already gone off on a vector that is no longer applicable to a scanner or to a computer monitor. Now you mentioned the saturation. I will go in and adjust saturation. Kodachromes, if you notice how blue this is, Kodachrome has a hard time recording dark green. Chicago Northwestern's awful. WB Green is awful. And then the scanner injects a lot more blue. So a lot of times I'll isolate just this dark blue, and I'll come down here in the saturation and I will desaturate it, just to get rid of a lot of that blue. And the cyan's same way. You can go in and desaturate. You can see where the cyan is if you move that all the way to one side. And again, you just play around with these little things until you get to something that looks reasonably well. Then you can put your cursor on an area that you think should be one color, and the cursor will tell you if it's really that color or not.
So one of the things I struggle with is the order in which to do them, right? Because if I tinker with one, it can impact the results I get in another.
Remember, baby steps,
Yeah.
each one, different highways.
Yeah.
There's no correct order to do these in.
Okay.
There's no correct amount to do these in. It's all image specific, and it's all how you create a workflow that works for you.
Mm.
How would you drive from here to Bellingham? Chances are you're going to take left turns and right turns that I
Yeah.
might not take.
Right.
You're going to go a different route. You're still going to get there.
Yeah.
You just took a different road. So if there's somebody that's telling you that there's only one way to get there in Photoshop, they're full of it. It's all personal workflow, what works best for you.
Okay.
But I can tell you that I use the levels, I use the curves, I use the hue saturation. Sometimes I'll use color balance.
Shadows, highlights you mentioned.
Shadows, highlights I'll use. Sometimes on rare occasion I'll use this channel mixer, which allows you to take pixels out of one channel, out of cyan say, and move them to the yellow channel. But that's pretty rare when I have to do that.
How do you fix redshift?
This little color restoration thing right here.
Yeah, in Photoshop, we talked about doing it.
You want to get most of the way here.
Okay.
Oddly enough, fixing that color shift in Photoshop is a lot harder than clicking that little button right there.
So, that's been my experience too, because I'm a Photoshop idiot, really. But Dean pointed out that when we clicked it there, we lost a lot of our blue in the sky.
Sometimes you have to sacrifice one thing to gain another.
Yeah.
You can go back in and put that blue back
So
in.
it's easier to put the blue back into the
It's
sky.
easier to put the blue back in Photoshop than it is to take the red out.
Okay. That's why that checkbox will not get us a knuckle wrap.
That's correct. That's correct. A lot of this stuff is trial and error. You're going to play with it. And don't be afraid to click on buttons. Don't be afraid to screw up a scan entirely, because you've always got the original raw. You can go back and start over again.
Right.
You haven't committed yourself.
Do you tend to work with the whole image versus breaking that out into working on the individual channels? Or I'm sorry, setting up a bunch of different layers for an image?
Some people like to use the layers. They'll set up an adjustment layer where they can make all these changes, and if they don't like it, they just delete the
Right.
layer and then they're back to where they started from.
That's right.
You can do that, but it takes time.
Yeah,
And I'm in a production system,
right.
and I've done it enough times, I know what works and what doesn't work.
Mhm.
Although I have had to go back and start over again. I've manipulated a scan until it just looks completely stupid. And I've deleted it, go back to my original and start over again.
So no open bottle of beer when doing this work, because you end up having to start over.
Probably, yeah. Unless you like your WP engines with mauve noses. Okay, any questions on Photoshop or scanning color slides?
As far as sharpness,
Mm-hmm.
unsharpened mask sounds
Unsharp
like
mask is the way to
is
go.
kind of your
In the
go-to.
lightness channel of lab color.
Lightness to lab color. Okay.
That, I've never even heard of that before you showed it. That was really good info.
How about graininess?
The sharpness, again, when you're in unsharp mask.
Yeah.
Unsharp mask. This threshold is what will cut down on the graininess.
Okay.
Now let me just take this up so we can kind of see.
I guess another way to state that is, do you use any of the other filters?
Well, yes, but not necessarily for doing this kind of stuff.
Like noise filter or?
on rare occasion, I have used the noise to put back in film grain when I've altered an image. Like if I add sky to an image to make it work for a cover, I've taken a horizontal photo and I've made it a vertical by adding a bunch of sky.
Right,
Sometimes that sky has no texture to it and it stands out.
right.
So I'll go in and I'll add noise into that
Okay.
blue sky just to make it match better.
Right.
But other than that, no.
Okay.
Now, the question was brought up earlier about scanning previously printed stuff.
Right.
Now, when you scan something that's been previously printed, if you look at it under a loop, it's made up of little dots. So I go into here after I've made my scan and I'll do blur more. And I'll do that up to 5 or maybe even 6 times. I'll hit blur more, go up, blur more, blur more.
Is that a fixed increment?
It is,
I've
it
got,
is.
the postcard I was thinking of when I asked the question is right here. I was wondering,
Oh,
could we just play around with it?
yeah, sure, let's
That's cool.
do it.
You know, that there's two
Sounds
questions, one of which is, what is the best way to scan that for the archive purpose? And then, what's the best thing to print it out?
Okay, let's do that.
Right.
Can we take a brief timeout? while I
Yes.
switch tapes.